All right, recording. All right, good morning, everybody. Scott Dolch here, Executive Director, Connecticut Restaurant Association. First and foremost, I appreciate Commissioner Lehman. I think this is maybe his third or fourth webinar with us, and where we are currently in the state of affairs in Connecticut, trying to get control of the second wave here. I don't want to call it a second wave yet, but second surge of the virus in certain areas of the state. Fortunate back in early October to get to phase 3. I know, there's a handful of cities already that are rolling back to phase 2, and we'll get into that a little bit into this presentation. But obviously, David being on, giving us an opportunity for Q&A and allowing you guys to ask questions, hopefully get everything answered as we can. But just as a reminder, best way to put in questions is in the chat box on the right side of your screen. Obviously, you could text me or other ways like that, but obviously the chat, we have well over probably 130, 140 folks that'll be on this call. It's too hard to probably have people unmute themselves and ask questions. It'll just be chaos. So if you could use the chat, we'll try to answer questions as we go as well, which we typically try to do. So Yvette and Jennifer on my team will be there to kind of go through that part. So I will share my screen and get started here with, I'm going to do a quick update for everybody before, hopefully that everyone can see that now. All right, so I have just some slides. I think it's easier for you guys visually to see everything and kind of go through where we are, current state of affairs. So obviously, Commissioner Lehman, Yvette is on with us as our membership director. I'll take this over, Yvette, just so you don't have to go back and forth, because I know we want to get to Commissioner. So first and foremost, what is tomorrow? I shouldn't have to even bring that up. But for everyone listening on the call, I know whether you follow national news or not, I really so much want to make a big push to make sure you get out and vote. You promote your staffs, you put everybody else to vote. This isn't just about a national election. This is very much holding truth to what we deal with in Connecticut and the people that we're going to be electing into office in our House and Senate for the 2021 and 2022 session. So I know you guys, we've had a lot of side conversations. We have our legislative committee and everything else, but everyone wants to talk about the bigger presidential election. But realistically, the races here in Connecticut and what we saw 2 years ago, we had races that were less than 100 votes in different towns that swayed who won, who didn't win. So I continue to push that no matter what side of the aisle you're on. I talk about that all the time as an association. We're about pro-business. We're about supporting business, making sure we put legislators in that understand our challenges, but obviously, first and foremost, our challenges right now, coming out of this pandemic, as we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and the chance to recover, and what that's going to mean in our state House and Senate with the governor moving forward. So you guys all know this tomorrow, but I hope, continue to promote it, use your socials, everything else let's have a record number of people out in the ballot tomorrow voting. Stay safe, keep your mask on. If you already absentee ballot, great, but hopefully if you haven't, you're going to take the time to go vote at some point, and also allowing your staff and team to get out as well. All right, just a quick membership update. Again, thank you to all of those that were able to pay your dues this year. I know there's definitely some challenges with a lot of you guys. We've fielded a lot of phone calls with the ones that have. It's important. It's kept our association running and staying afloat to try to be a voice for you guys. As you know, you're a dual member of the National Restaurant Association if you become a member of us. To our allied members, I know Yvette has been working tirelessly doing videos that are up on our website. I recommend everyone listening to use our website, not only for the FAQ page that we continue to update and try to answer so many of your questions and make it easier for you guys to go there, but also for our allied members. We have a lot of vendors that have been incredible throughout this pandemic, trying to help each of you guys and work with the CRA. I know I probably just could go down a list of those, as we talked with the other day. Wingsight's a perfect example in Wethersfield, a local state company that's been providing plexiglass barriers and creative stuff. And they came to us and said, hey, we want to partner together. We want to offer discounts to your members, and we want to help support the CRA. I mean, we have hundreds of other allied members that are talking to us in that regard, but please don't hesitate to go on our site, watch those videos that are put together, talks more about those vendors, those allied partners of ours, what they're doing for you, the discounts, the opportunities. But please, if you have questions, use the chat on the side. But we wouldn't be here without our members. We wouldn't have an association. And I welcome all the new members we got this year. But obviously, as we go into 2021, we're hoping to continue to grow that. Our base is getting stronger, which is great, even in the middle of a pandemic. But if you cannot make a payment or you need to delay that, we totally understand. This isn't about whether you can pay your dues right now. It's about getting all of your restaurants, every single restaurant in our state, a chance to survive this pandemic. So I just wanted to have a quick slide there to thank everybody. And if you have any questions, obviously, Vet's contact information that's at the bottom. Servsafe, you guys know our partnership with Servsafe through National. They've been incredibly helpful, and I'll get to another slide down the list here about what they're doing. But we still are offering our in-person classes. We have a fully online training and exam program. Our online classes and in-person tests we're doing inside of our offices in Farmington with Jennifer and our team. They also have offered 4 free videos so far. They have a reopening guideline video, a takeout video, a delivery video, and even now a conflict de-escalation video. They're all free. I highly recommend having your staff or your managers go to our website at ctrestaurant.org/servsafe. But again, I know the certifications are important. We continue to try to teach classes in a safe manner throughout the state in person, as well as the online class and in-person test inside Farmington. So if you need to get your Servsafe certification done, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jennifer. Her contact information is below. So kind of 2 items. All right, let's get into the weeds now, a little bit of where we are. I know I'm getting a lot of questions on a federal side. Hoping that another round of stimulus, as we know, I talked about the top of this, there's an election. So obviously no one wants to help each other in the election by passing a stimulus package. Unfortunately, we're going to have to see how everything shakes out tomorrow down there in DC with our own delegates, with the delegates across the country. What's going to happen with the Senate, what's going to happen with the House, obviously who will be the president will definitely play a huge role in what happens in another round of stimulus. And I use that as an example as we talk to the National Restaurant Association. I talk to them daily and kind of what we're hearing, what we're thinking. Obviously, if let's just say hypothetically Trump was to win, but the Senate was taken over by Democrats, would that make it harder to pass a stimulus? If Biden was to win, but Trump's still in office, will he not sign a stimulus package? There's so many scenarios that no one really has an answer to right now. However, I can say that the voice of our industry is loud and we are doing everything we can to get another round of stimulus. The experts down there at National think realistically we're looking at probably beginning to end of January. Obviously, I want to be optimistic and think it could happen sooner, but realistically, that's where they are right now of what they think. So obviously, understanding winter is coming, no pun intended, of how you prepare, thinking that there's another round of stimulus on the horizon. I do think there will be something passed, but I also do not think it's going to probably happen in the next 60 to 90 days and how that's going to affect your business. So I leave you there with that. I also put up our current delegates. I know some of them are in some races here, but I've been tirelessly working with each of them throughout the pandemic, trying to get additional stimulus dollars, talk about the current packages and everything there. So we'll continue our outreach. Obviously, after the election tomorrow, who will still be I guess our fearless 7 delegates in Connecticut to helping this industry with additional round of funding. So that's really the federal update. I wish I had more, but the election is really making the most noise as we go forward. Just some advocacy updates going now to Connecticut. I know Nicole might be on, but I'll just kind of go through this quickly with David here. A couple things that you guys need to understand. This is kind of from our last webinar. We have an extension of the governor's emergency powers. We're extended to February 9th, as well as extended outdoor dining and to-go alcohol was extended to outdoor dining November 12th and to-go alcohol November 9th. David can bring this up probably after this, but please note that we are working right now with the administration to extend expanded outdoor dining as well as to-go alcohol through the length of the emergency order. Why can't we go beyond that? That's only the power that the governor has right now is February 9th. If we I want to try to extend expanded outdoor dining to go alcohol in a much longer term scale, but we might have to work through legislative the legislative session and who comes out of this election on a state level in the House and Senate to get that extended. I'd love to have like a 2-year expanded outdoor dining opportunity to help you guys in a road to recovery. I think there's a lot of towns, a lot of DECD staff that have been very appreciative and would love to talk about that, but we have to go through the lobbying world and legislative world to get this done. So right now we're hoping to extend both those 2 items through February 9th, which is the length of the emergency order currently. And hopefully that gets announced. I know David's on the call as we talked to Paul Mounds as well. We're hoping at some point this week, those 2 will be extended in an executive order. Also, the extension of sexual harassment training from October 1st. Now it's till January 1st. That window is still coming. We're at 60 days now, making sure, you get your sexual harassment training for your staff done. Understand Ryan O'Donnell's on the call with Siegel, O'Connell, O'Donnell, and Beck. Our legal counsel has actually created the same certification, but their own videos that are specific to our industry. And one video is for your managers and one video is for your staff. I highly recommend using Ryan. It has no cost to our members. It's a great incentive as obviously being a part of our association. And then the other piece we've talked about, the new state regulations on tip credit and server side work that has been adopted. We are going to, everything else going on in phase 3 and phase 2, but we're going to have a member only next week for our members, a webinar with Ryan and hopefully Angelo from the National Restaurant Association's legal counsel side as well to talk about that. And obviously you guys know that we adopted those for the most part, but still making sure you're following the right rules moving forward to protect yourself. So we're going to go through what those guidelines are, and it is a specific membership benefit and doing a webinar. So you'll have to show your membership to be able to be a part of that. So that'll be at next week at some point. And once we get that information out, we will send it to you. All right. Taking a breath here and looking at, I just wanted to put up a quick screenshot. As you guys know, I lead with restaurants are not the problem. We've seen that across the country. We've seen that you guys as a whole, and I talk to media every single day for almost 8 months now. You guys have led the charge here in keeping people safe without question. We've been open for outdoor dining since late May 20th. We've been open for indoor dining since June 17th. We have not seen anything causing our spikes outside of bad actors. I put up these screenshots. We need to do a better job of continuing to follow our rules, but also police each other. At the end of the day, like it's impossible for me or David or others to police 8,500 restaurants across our state. However, you guys know the rules. You guys know, what we've worked on. As I've told the media, and I'll tell David, these guidelines aren't just coming from the state. We've been fortunate to have a seat at the table with the commissioner, with the governor, with his entire staff to talk about these rules. We've been updating rules, as you guys know, bar seating to gloves, to everything else that we've worked diligently. But listen, bad actors will ruin it for everybody. I use these screenshots. If you didn't see on the left, that was actually Governor Lamont's tweet early last week of a Bridgeport, kind of nightclub showcasing, a bad actor. If you watch the video, you'll quickly see, no one's wearing a mask. Everyone's holding drinks for the most part. No one's moving. It's not a restaurant setting by any stretch of the imagination. But again, it's what the public sees. It's what the media sees. You also see the article in the Fairfield pub being shut down. In the Hartford Current, you see Lamont calling for stricter enforcement on these rules. Obviously, David reaches out to me and I continue to talk. I know the 99% of you are doing the right thing, but we have to police each other. We have to make sure, because guess what? As what we saw in New Jersey, I use as an example, New Jersey waited 2 more months to open indoor dining because of bad actors. Governor Murphy, used the example of Lamont's tweet with 2 bars that were masquerading like restaurants, as the governor said. But, we are continuing to try to get the message out that we are not the problem, because we aren't. The majority of our restaurants are doing everything to keep people safe with Beyond. But I just want to make sure I bring that up to everybody. I use these as examples. This is what I deal with in the media every day, and having to try to defend our industry. And it makes it easier when this doesn't happen. But it makes it easier when I get a phone call and says, hey, Scott, I talked to the owner. I think you should reach out. I'm happy to reach out to anybody that you think is an owner that's not following guidelines, or, because they need to understand that it's not only affecting their own business. And I can tell you right now, what I've seen across the country, if you get labeled as not following COVID restrictions and you get labeled on a social media side, it's very hard with your brand. Your own brand is in jeopardy. Secondly, you're hurting everybody else in our industry that's been trying to do it right and stay afloat. I get it. You're trying to make money. You're trying to survive. All of that in every call that I take every single day, I take it to heart. But understand that, we are trying to continue to move the ball forward, and situations like this make it harder for us to stay in phase 3 or get beyond where we are currently. So I just make sure I bring that up. I also add on the next slide, there are continued to be safe operating guidelines that we have on our website. You see the safe operating guidance that has been updated with the help of the National Restaurant Association. It talks about hand washing, and how safe that is, and why we got rid of gloves, because it's safer, but making sure your staff is washing their hands for 20 seconds constantly throughout the day, mask wearing, social distancing, daily health checks, even taking temperature checks. I know most of you guys are doing. Also, rearranging your workspaces, making sure people aren't in close contact. That 15 minutes of close contact is important. How your workspaces are set up, inside, back of house, front of house, is important. Ventilation, making sure you're working with a lot of these local companies to help increase your ventilation inside, outside, as we'll get into. Also, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act is there to protect your employees. If, God forbid, someone does come down with the virus and has to go home, they need to understand that they're protected, and you have dollars, you have a tax write-off to protect them in that situation. And then the last piece is constant communication with your staff. I can't preach that enough. The challenges I've seen is when our owners and managers are not communicating and being upfront, and we can help you through that and what to say, but having those meetings, making sure your staff know that their best interest is what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep them safe, but also, there's protocols. There's a reason why we rearrange the workspace. There's a reason why, decisions they make outside of work, of going to parties and playing beer pong and doing all this other stuff, not only affects their job, it affects the business and affects other people's jobs. So I don't know if I froze there or if it was me, but I'll get to the next slide here. All right, so almost done, David. I know you're waiting, but I just want to get updates to phases and state guidelines. So phase 3 versus phase 2, you guys have seen recently that our daily COVID cases are starting to go up and uptick in certain parts of the state. An executive order 2 weeks ago gives the power now to the mayors and first selectmen to roll back to phase 2 if you're not only now in the red, but if you're in the orange as of last week, David, correct? That a mayor first selectman can do that. I know we've had 7 or 8, maybe 9 towns. I know David could probably get into how many have rolled back, but understanding the difference between phase 3 and phase 2, I kind of have on the next slide. You see the 75% capacity down to 50%, indoor events from 100 and outdoor 150 to 25 and outdoor 100. And obviously outdoor events and indoor performing venues, whether they can stay open or not. So this is a big deal, obviously, and you need to keep track in your towns with your mayors and first selectmen of what decisions they're making. Unfortunately, in the executive order, they can't piecemeal phase 2 right now. We're still looking at it, but obviously us not being the problem, I know some mayors and first selectmen have tried to say to me, hey, we don't want to hurt restaurants. I know getting to 75% is very, very difficult unless you spend thousands and thousands of dollars on Plexi. So how we kind of work through this, and we're still talking to David and to the governor on a daily basis about this. We had a good Friday. I don't know how Monday is going to play out. David might know better than me. We had that 6.1 day last week. We had a 4.1. We had a 3.4. We did have a low 2s, a 2.4 on Friday. But Mondays are always the day that makes me the most nervous because we don't count weekends. So, you have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday's numbers thrown into one day. I'm knocking on wood that we have a good day and we start to flatten this curve. But understanding the difference between phase 3 and phase 2, and right now the executive order, how it stands last thing, update with this, and then I'm almost done for David to fully go back through. Please understand that the mayors and first selectmen have 96 hours before they can do it right away, but they have to let David know whether they're going back to phase 2. If they do not let him know, they automatically go back to phase 2. They stay in phase 2 for 14 days. And then they have an option. They either come out of it if they come out of the orange and red, or if they're still in there, the mayor first selectman could then pull them back to phase 3 at the end of 14 days. But there's no 5 days in going, oh, we made a mistake, let's go back to phase 3. It's a 14-day change from phase 3 to phase 2. So if you guys are in Stamford, New Haven, Norwalk. I'm just naming states that are in phase 2. You're in phase 2 for 14 days currently, and how that's going to play out. So making sure you guys understand how this executive order is working. And then last couple slides, and then David's up. Guideline review. I know there's a lot of new people on the call. We've kind of talked through this. Walk-up bars at private events are allowed. We updated that. Restaurant bar seating, I still get confusion with public health officials that are calling me. We did update this. Understand, think of a bartender like a server. The things they do working behind the bar is limited to pouring, serving beverages, taking processing orders, serving food, and delivering, picking up the bill. They can do all that with a mask on without needing plexi in front of them. If they're mixing a drink, this is our best practices from the CRA. We recommend almost creating a plexiglass workstation. I know you have speed rails. I know your typical bartenders like to work down the rail. That's not the case right now. Have them have a workstation that's at least 6 feet away from patrons. You don't have to have plexi as long as it's 6 feet away, but it's our best practices to do that. Have them make those mixed drinks in that area. If they're making 6 or 7 drinks for a table for the server, have it make it in that workstation. Everywhere else, you do not need to have plexi across the bar, and your guests have to be served with food. They have to have food with drink. I can't drive that message home enough. I know there's people that yell at me that say, oh, there's other states that don't have that. I also see both sides of this, and seeing the bad actor situation of the slide of just having drinks, the challenges that it plays. So understand they have to be seated at the bar. There's no walk-up service. They have to have it. They can sit down in front of a bartender with a mask on and be served and be treated like the server would. The bartender keeping their space as best they can. And then obviously the party separation has to be 6 feet unless you have a plexiglass barrier to separate that to use your seating. So restaurant bar seating, outdoor tent requirements. I didn't put the third bullet. I'll let David talk about it, but obviously you get 2 sides currently. We're going to get at least some 60-degree weather this weekend, knock on wood, trying to savor as much outdoor dining as possible. Comprising 50% or more of your tent down, you start to go into being indoor dining and what that means. But space heaters, anything you're using for heat, you have to get approved from your town and the local permits and inspectors. You should be talking to them anyway. And then obviously the fully enclosed tents. David can take that one in a second and talk about it. Last thing that they've launched, Connecticut Care Small Business Grant Program on November 9th, which is a week from today. Application process will be open for a $50 million program. Eligible businesses can receive up to $5,000. I'm hoping, as I've told David, we continue to try to figure out ways to grow this program. But at the end of the day, anybody that's eligible, you have to have 20 FTEs or less, or $1.5 million or less, one or the other, of payroll from 2019. If you have either of those two, you're eligible. I highly recommend to apply. Hopefully those grant sizes increase, and hopefully we can even work on the eligibility piece. But at least, I want to make you guys aware of this program, because obviously Monday is the time frame of when applications will go in. And obviously, we know from the bridge loan program, not everybody that applied was eligible. It was able to get the dollars. So I start there, and you have to show 20% hardship. And I will leave that there. That is my update. Longer than I wanted, but same time wanted to make sure you guys knew everything we talked about here. So without further ado, the virtual floor is the commissioners.
Scott, thank you very much. A tough act to follow, as always here. I do appreciate you guys having me back on. I think this is my third or fourth time, and I still think back to April, which feels like years ago, when Dan Miser was kind enough to represent this group on the Reopen Committee. I do want to touch on a number of points, but I want to spend a lot of time on Q&A. But before I kind of get into it, the first thing I want to say is the relationship that we have, the state government with the Restaurant Association. It's been really great. It has been a partnership, as Scott's mentioned, and there's lots of access and lots of dialogue, and that's going to continue. Right? We're going to be living with COVID for, unfortunately, a while. I don't know if that's 3 months, 6 months, or longer, but I think we need to continue the dialogue, and we want to make sure, as Scott was mentioning, as there's adjustments and tweaks where we can to afford more flexibility and ability to make money and operate, we absolutely want to do that, and we'll continue to do that. But at the same time, public health is going to be front and center, and something that we've been very, very focused on. So really appreciate the relationship to date, and look forward to however much longer we're going to be battling this indefinitely. I do want to talk a little bit about the numbers, though, because I think it's important in terms of where we are with coronavirus. So many of you probably follow this, some may not. So I do want to rehash it a little bit. So, the state has seen, along with the rest of the country and the region, a significant increase. So to give you guys a flavor, hospitalizations in the month of October have been up threefold. We were around 110, we're around 330 right now, hospitalizations. Still well behind where we were in April, but hospitalizations, there's a 7 to 14 day lag, and we've seen a lot more cases in the month of October. To give you guys a sense of that, around the summer, we were averaging around 75 cases per day in Connecticut. Maybe it was 75 to 100. At the beginning of October, it was around 150 to 200 cases per day. And right now in Connecticut, we're at 800 cases per day. So you've seen a threefold increase in hospitalizations and a fourfold increase in infections. And the concerning thing for us is the amount of hospitalizations that we think will be following the cases and ultimately the deaths as well. But the real concern right now, and we're spending a lot of time on this, is community spread. And that's not a word I hope to repeat before, but when you get into this level of community spread where you have enough infection in the state, in the community, that makes contact tracing tougher. That makes a lot of the other interventions that we have tougher because so many people have it. The virus is so prevalent. So we've been spending a lot of time on that. And unfortunately, we are at this level where we have community spread now with the significant increase in cases in October. The case numbers today are not good. They'll be announced formally later today, but the trend continues: increased cases, increased positivity. And I mention it because it's something that we all need to be really vigilant. Scott referenced some of the restaurants masquerading at bars. That's not good for any of us. It's not good for the state. And we want to keep as much open as we can keep open. But when you get to this level of community spread, there's real concern, especially given we just started with November, and we feel like the winter is going to be more challenging as more stuff happens indoors. So we can talk more about it, but there's been a significant increase in cases and hospitalizations, and where we are right now, we feel like it's a lot harder to do the testing and tracing to mitigate it, given how prevalent the virus is. So more on the Q&A, and that I just thought it was important to go through some of those numbers and some of the facts there, and what we're grappling with, and what I spend time on with the Public Health Commissioner. Scott referenced the executive orders, so outdoor dining, ability to deliver alcohol and offer takeout alcohol. We absolutely are going to extend those. A date has not been finalized, whether it's February 9th or some different date, but we understand how important those are. And again, we want to provide as much flexibility as possible. Scott referenced the governor cannot have executive orders beyond the crisis itself, but certainly that's something I'm happy to discuss. Through legislation, allowing that for restaurants beyond COVID. So certainly happy to have that dialogue. But if there are other executive orders that provide flexibility that you think we should be considering as we enter the winter, absolutely want to be talking about it. I understand how important that is, and that's something we can turn around pretty quickly. A couple notes on the economy, and Scott's heard this, but one of the things we look at on a regular basis outside, we certainly track employment data, GDP data. A lot of that tends to be very backward looking, though, in terms of when you get it at the state level. One thing which we look at a lot is the CNN Business and Moody's have come together for what they call a back to normal index. And for those that haven't seen it, I would encourage it. It uses 37 different real-time indicators of economic output. One of them actually is, I think, open table reservations in various states. But it gives you a sense of social and economic activity. And Connecticut's held pretty steady on this. So Connecticut's economy is around 88% of where we were pre-pandemic. The country, by contrast, is at 83%. And I think the best state is around 92, 93%, and that's Maine right now. And if you take out Hawaii, which is very reliant on tourism, there's many states that are 75% plus or minus. So 88% puts Connecticut at number 10 of 50 states in terms of recovery. Obviously, it's frustrating because we're entering this more precarious period right now, but we look a lot at this index to get a sense of where the Connecticut economy is, where we are in terms of Google mobility, open table, I referenced home sales. Our goal is to maximize that while minimizing the virus. We have looked at the data, and I think we feel pretty strongly that consumer confidence is a big part of this. Regardless of what the government says can happen or can't happen, we need consumers to be ready to go out and sit indoors, to do shopping, et cetera, and not just stay in their houses this winter. So we're going to keep monitoring that, but that's really the balance I mentioned, because in my mind, and we've seen examples of this now that we've had 8 months of coronavirus where there have been countries that have just let the virus completely rip. Their economy's been hurt very hard. And at the same time, countries that have shut down their economies, for the virus's sake, their economies have been hurt just as hard. So my point here is I think there is a spot in the middle where you're managing the virus, but at the same time encouraging the activity that is safe, but making sure that consumers are okay. Because if you lose the battle on consumer confidence, even if the government says restaurants can be open, whatever, 50, 75%, you're not going to see a lot of activity. So we spend a lot of time on that, trying to make sure that we're managing the virus. And I guess maybe the last point, or last 2 points, folks have probably seen what's happened in Europe, but if not, that's a good example. And we spend time looking at Europe because Europe was 2 to 4 weeks ahead of us in the spring in terms of the infections, and especially in places like Italy at the time. Now it feels like France is much more of a hotspot. The UK is a very big hotspot. And 3 countries now have actually shut down, basically gone to a variant of the shutdown that happened in the spring. So they've shut down restaurants, safe for takeout, and what they call non-essential businesses. They've actually left schools open. So the countries that have done this, Germany, France, and the UK, I think it's a good analog. We're not there yet. I hope we don't get there, but we spend a lot of time thinking about it, because if we don't get the virus under control, if we don't get the community spread under control, then I think that's where we could end up as a state. And when I say Connecticut, I think that's where the US could be. So we obviously want to avoid that. That's not where we want to go. But I think we seriously need to consider more interventions and more measures to make sure that we can manage the virus. And in 2 to 4 weeks, there's not a shutdown like what you're seeing in Europe, because that's terrible for the economy, and we desperately want to avoid it. So listen, I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions. And actually, sorry, I forgot the one last point I wanted to mention on tents. And Scott, Dan Miser, and I spoke with a few other restaurateurs too over the weekend. I want to clarify, where the state is on tents. And again, like everything else, this is something where we want to work with the Restaurant Association, restaurateurs. We understand there have been investments that have been made, and the importance of kind of sitting outdoors. Yeah, this Scott mentioned the weather is supposed to be great after tomorrow, but at some point it's going to get cold. What the state is focused on, whether it's the outdoor dining with the 50% open, or if it's a 4-sided tent or structure, we care about ventilation and airflow, and that's really what is crucial to us. The concern with tents that don't have, or structures like igloos that don't have airflow, is that the amount of virus that can be spread there, we think, is quite significant. We think that is quite more risky than sitting indoors in a dining room that has ventilation and airflow, and you can have the virus dissipate. So what we want to work on with Scott and this group is, how can we make sure there's adequate ventilation in these outdoor structures? So we're starting to have those conversations. I understand time is of the essence, but that's really the focus from the state. So we want to make sure there is that airflow, that is that ventilation, to keep your customers safe. Back to you, Scott.
Yeah, no, listen, David, and to everyone listening in, because I've probably gotten more texts and calls about these structures this weekend, and I get it. And I think that, as David knows, like, the challenge with each of you guys is the investment you made up front, and then, with the fully banning them, conversation. So I applaud David in the fact that we've gone back and forth all weekend. I do think if you have these structures or looking to purchase them, and I've already said, instead of banning them, what are the restrictions? Like, how can we make sure there's airflow? Having a vent out the top, maybe you cut it out of the igloo, or you cut it out of the greenhouse, and you have, forced hot air through the bottom, or whatever it might be. Like, I'm trying to work with David and with DPH, because it's a little more of the public health side, to figure out what we can get passed through. And obviously it could be a little bit more of a cost to you guys. We want to be very conscious of that. But at the same time, I also understand that even though some people might say not, I do think guests are looking at greenhouses and going, I'd rather sit there than sit inside your restaurant. And the one thing is, you're going to take every turn you possibly can. Every guest that comes out, you want to give them an option. So we're going to work through that today, tomorrow, for those listening in. I don't think I know, Bill, it's a great question of the study and everything else. Totally. I think that's something we should talk about more on the specific to the igloos, but also all the structures. If you enclose a 4-walled tent, what does that mean? And how can you make sure, if you're going to pump heat into it and it's 45 degrees outside, and it's what are the restrictions, and how do you, and you guys have followed strict guidelines throughout this pandemic. I think that's what I shared with David, and obviously to the public health side, like, you guys are willing to do that. Let's figure out what that is. So hopefully we can get this resolved.
Yeah.
as much as we possibly can.
And I just one more thing,
Go ahead.
Scott, sorry, on this point, just because I'm not a public health expert. I spend a lot of time with our public health team as well as our occupational safety folks. From a lay perspective, again, what we care about is that outdoor, whether it's tent or whatever it looks like. The question is the ventilation as good or better than your indoor dining room? And if the answer to that is yes, that's exactly what we want to encourage, because it gives you guys more capacity and you have ventilation that is equal to, if not better than, what's happening indoors at your dining room. So and that's understanding vents, if hot air is coming in and going out somewhere else. Again, we want to avoid getting too technical and too prescriptive, but that's really what the state's trying to get at, is making sure that ventilation is there, consistent with your indoor dining room or better.
Other quick questions. Looks like Michelle has a question, David, and I think I could try to answer, but you can go ahead. They're just kind of the difference between with food trucks at breweries and vineyards, like who's policing the food and what type of food needs to be with drink. I mean, I think our restaurants understand it, but I guess there's definitely a lot of, worry that what is the definition of having food with drink at all these different locations, and what type of food, and your side as this was written, I want to make sure that you get some clarity to everyone listening in.
Yeah, no, and again, this is where, we try to not be too prescriptive, listing, pizza's okay, but pretzels are not okay. The way that the state has termed this in the executive order is a dining experience needs to be offered. So we didn't say certain food trucks are okay and others are not. Broadly, food trucks are allowed and they're enabled, and that counts as providing that dining experience to folks that are out there. So I don't think we're going to get more prescriptive. I think if there are issues where, and I've heard a few of them, where local public health might be viewing things differently than other local public health, that should be kind of elevated, and we can help make sure there's consistency on that from the state perspective. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But broadly, what the state cares about is there a dining experience? Are people going to eat and drink, not just drink?
No, good. I want to go back to, as I look at all these questions starting to pop up. I know Bill and both Bills asking just about the tents and safety and stuff. And I think David and I have gone back and forth on, I know there was some confidence of, maybe it's only one sitting in an evening, but I also know if someone has lunch or dinner, like, you want to be able to use those structures in a safe way and be able to ventilate them out, maybe spray them with those spray. Like, what are the restrictions with DPH? We need to make sure ventilation is happening in those structures. And then also, what rules you have to follow, the same way you follow the 6-foot spacing, or how high the plexiglass barrier has to be between booths, so on and so forth. So I think they're great questions. I think we could continue to talk about this issue, but I think it's something that I'm still trying to take back with David offline and hear the concerns with DPH and try to get, some clarity so you guys can move forward here this week, hopefully, following certain strict guidelines to be able to use them. Or if you're, obviously I know a lot of you guys have purchased them, or whether or not they're worth the investment if you can't use them.
Yeah, and again, I see the question. Sorry, I just pulled up the chat. If there's a question about if the airflow, and this, again, this gets into the details of it, but if the airflow and the new air that's being pumped into the structure is consistent with the dining room, and there is that kind of circulation, and the hot air is the older air is being pushed out, that should work for us. And that's what we want to run down and provide that clarity to you guys. It's where, there isn't any airflow, or there isn't heating and vents in the tent, that's not recirculating fresh air. That's the problem.
There's a question here, David, on if you schedule a phase 3 party for 100 people and then your town rolls back to phase 2, is there a grandfather? Is there protection, or you lose that event?
No, not right now. No, there's not a grandfather, and the rationale for that, is just given where the numbers are. We think that the public health interventions that we're trying to do, we really want to move back, and we're trying to enable that moving back, quickly when you get into that red zone, which are, those are significant numbers of virus and density of virus. So that has not been a topic of conversation. Again, we can take it up, but I think it's unlikely that we would move on that one, just given what the intent is of the phase.
All right, let's go back to the small business grants for a second. There's been a couple questions early on, and then before, someone's asking, can multiple locations apply separately for the grant? Or where's the eligibility if you have, 3 restaurants in different towns?
Yeah,
with
it's
the 20
by
FTE and 1.5.
yeah, the way we're doing it is by taxpayer identification number. So for every taxpayer identification number you have, if you have 3 of them for 3 different entities, again, I'm not sure how that business is set up, then you can apply. But if you have 1 taxpayer identification number, which is kind of an umbrella of everything, then that's viewed at that level of business. And the reason we're doing it that way is, there's roughly 50,000 businesses across the state that could be eligible for the grant. There's a huge lift in terms of technology and simplicity. So we need to look to data that we have and that is scalable, and the taxpayer identification number serves that.
Okay. And then let's see, just gonna go through. There's like the legality of employee who refuses to test before returning to work due to their beliefs. If they refuse and we don't take them back, have they quit?
Yeah, that's not something that I'm able to opine on. That's more of an employment law question.
Yeah. I don't know if Ryan's on, not to put Ryan on the call, but I think we can follow up with that question later on, Lisa, for you as we continue dealing with the virus within, the businesses and how to manage it the best way you can moving forward. So, David, I get a lot of questions. One in particular that was actually at the top, but obviously I got a lot of emails. And I know we've gone back and forth on the $5,000, but how is the program? Let's say you're looking for 10,000 businesses. Let's say 11,000 businesses apply. Is it the first 10,000 that are eligible get it? So they make sure they apply on the 9th, or is it based on need? Who has more hardship, and then the last out? How are you guys going to decipher if you have more than 10,000 applications?
Yeah, so the policy intent here was to touch as many of the state's smallest businesses, and then really there's a focus on our distressed municipalities in most of our largest cities. You've had higher unemployment. These are areas where we're less likely to get PPP, a lot of these businesses too. So half of the money will be focused on those areas and half will be focused on the balance of the state. We think that the window will open on November 9th, and it is likely, we haven't finalized the allocation formula, but it is likely that if there is more demand than there is dollars, that it will be allocated either first come, first serve or a similar manner. There's not a way with this many businesses, if we touch 10,000, to have a different algorithm on that. I think there is an inclination to favor businesses for sure that employ multiple people. So not sole proprietorships, but that are employing, creating jobs for others. But beyond that, if for example, Scott, to your question, if less businesses apply, we're certainly open-minded, and it's possible that we would, you'd have more dollars going out to the businesses that did apply and that were eligible in that instance. Right now, we don't expect that, but it certainly is possible.
Yeah, and then just understanding that too, I guess, what's the process? And you're kind of working through that now with your team, David. What's the process for, you have to show 20% hardship. So is it going to be pretty quick to throw the people out that their application out to be like, okay, yes, we got 8,000 applications, but only 3,800 or 5,000 actually meet the criteria? Or is that going to take longer? How hard?
We think we can do it. We're trying to do this, keep this application as simple as possible. So there's going to be an attestation. There will be some auditing likely on the back end, but we're really going to be asking folks to attest that their revenues are down 20% or more in 2020 versus 2019. But certain folks that don't fit the criteria, they either have more full-time employees, they don't meet the payroll that you referenced of 1.5 million or less, and they don't have that hardship, then they will be in the not eligible bucket. So that will winnow down a little bit, and ultimately good tax standing also is something that is important to us.
Sure. Okay. Then just kind of going through. So the other question that's coming up, which I'll answer, not so much for David, blanket approach to an employee testing positive. I know obviously we've worked through that a little bit, and obviously our legal counsel has been extremely helpful. It obviously works within your public health. That's why I talked about, your workspace, rearranging your workspace and keeping people out of close contact. The last thing you want to have to do is shut down your business because of a potential COVID case within your four walls of your business, or someone that's went home and tested positive, their spouse or whatever else. So, it's hard to answer that question and say, hey, it's blanket across the board. But obviously we have to take each instance and making sure you're doing your due diligence with your public health department and communicating and doing everything you can to keep your staff safe, send people to get tested, and then what the quarantine, and still trying to get some clarity on the quarantine and isolation. CDC has updated their guidelines, changed their guidelines, gone back and forth a number of times. Just so you know, like right now, if you test positive for the virus, as far as CDC is concerned, you can come back to work on the 11th day. You have to quarantine for 10 days. And as long as you don't have a fever 24 hours in that, you can go back to work. But then the other CDC guidance says if you were in close contact with someone that tested positive, you can't go back to work for 14 days, as you could be in an incubation period. So there's a lot of, changes to this throughout. And I don't get David too much into the weeds. I think the best advice I give to you right now is kind of reach out to us if you have, if you're dealing with something, and we'll try to give you guys the best, and obviously your peers as well, to say that this isn't affecting everybody. The last thing we want you to do is have to shut your business down, and how you do that and everything else, because we know, having to shut down for any length of time can be, a death sentence. So how you're working around that as best you can. And obviously we've had instances where they've had to shut down, which is awful to hear, but we've learned from it as an association, and we'll continue to give the guidance that we can to the best of our ability. But that goes back to that slide about all the different things, looking at the new updated guidance that the National Restaurant Association has put out, has CDC information in there, and how you want to be prepared. I think if you haven't prepared that COVID could be hitting your business, your restaurant, I will say it's shame on you right now. Like, you need to prepare yourself if there is one, and what you're going to do about it and how you're going to react. You're going to be proactive before you react. And I think that those are the things that I've seen the most. And if we can help through that process about you planning, with the hypotheticals and what that means, we're here to answer those questions. So Jennifer, it's a great question. Unfortunately, there's not like, hey, this is exactly what happens, because every instance is different. Who got it? Is it someone inside the restaurant? Where were they? How many people were in close contact? There's so many other details that, we can help as much as we can, because the last thing I want you to do is shut your business down. So hope that kind of answers a little bit. I know it's not the end all be all answer you guys want to have. You cannot go back to 75%, Susan, if you're in phase 2. It's 50% for the time being until you get out of phase 2, even though you have barriers. How long business should close, Rob, I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit, the 10 to 14 days and the 2 days, and how you manage it. Obviously we can take this offline. I think we are still trying to get some guidance as we talk to DPH on town levels, and also on a higher level about the best way to make sure our restaurants aren't having to shut down, but keep people safe. That already answered that question. Can we expect more help from the state? We won't see anything from this government most likely for months, if at all. So everyone here has a taste of winter this past week and understand how difficult it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one, Scott. So Matt, I appreciate the point, and it's certainly understood that how far $5,000 is going to go, especially for businesses that are larger employers. Right now the short answer is no. We're doing what we can at the state level with the CARES Act money that we have. The deficit financing, the large dollars, right? If you look at PPP, there was close to $7 billion. And when you think about the state's financial resources, we really need not just Connecticut, but other states too. We need the federal government to step up. And my hope is that it happens sooner rather than later. Obviously, we can't predict it, and that it's also retroactive when it does come out. So it's sensitive to that, because the cost of rent, utilities, payroll, especially as we enter winter, we get it. Right now, the state's not able to do more, but we like Scott and you guys are advocating for the federal government, to reach agreement on this point, especially as it relates to small businesses. So it's unfortunate what happened in DC, but we're going to keep pushing.
So I'm just looking at Carmela's rate, or people coming into her business, and how that looks to your customers. Listen, I lead with your relationships mean everything. As an association, as we talk about David and everything else, obviously I think we have a great mutual respect as we work through this. I can promise you we do not agree on everything, and going back and forth, but I use that as an example with your towns I know in the past, if you even had a relationship with public health, or you had a relationship with your town, everything else, like, the biggest thing is, like, for the most part, 99% of the public health officials I talk to don't want to shut you down. They don't want to they understand what you're going through. I had 4 calls this weekend about just with public health people specifically. The same with the police and fire and zoning and building inspectors. Like, but being upfront and starting your communication before you go to do something. If you're to add a 10, or if you were to, if you're going to do something inside with Plexi and just think, oh, well, I got them from the CRA, so I should be good. Like, being upfront and letting the people within your town know what you're doing and keeping people safe, being forthcoming and being, doing that ahead of time is only going to help you in the long run. I know there's 211. I know there's people out there that are putting up on stuff on social, which doesn't help any of us. Oh my God, this person wasn't wearing a mask. Like, I bet no one does, and it's ridiculous. Like, I hear it every single day, but I can't preach enough that your relationship with your mayor, your first selectman, your DECD, your public health, it matters. And it's definitely something that I can't say that would stop the raid example that you've given, but at the same time, I'm happy to help. I pick up the phone and call public health in all these different towns every single day. Building inspectors, just try to have honest conversations. At the end of the day, I know you guys are fighting for your lives to keep your businesses open. And I think they understand that for the most part. Obviously, there's bad actors in our industry. And I think there's been some challenges of people, that don't see the 30,000-foot view of what we're trying to do. So I appreciate the comment. I'm happy to help. That's really what we're here for too. As we talk so much about, I use the New York moniker of, well, our jobs as an association is to help restaurants succeed. Well, that has changed in the pandemic. My job is to help you survive, without question. So anything that I can do, I think most of you guys know me well enough. I'm going to advocate for this industry and help you guys get through this in any way that I can. But again, I understand the lack of respect and the challenges you guys are facing through this. But again, if I can help in any way, and I apologize that sometimes you get thrown into buckets when other restaurants in your town might not be doing it, and they just assume everyone's doing it. And that goes back to the bad actor situation. The more bad actors we have up on social media, it doesn't help consumer confidence, doesn't help the public perception, because people only see that. They don't see the 9,000 things you're doing in your restaurant to keep people safe every day. So hopefully we can continue to get our arms around it as we go forward. So I think the message to the public needs to be, you must eat to drink. That was a kind of a question earlier, David. I know the state and maybe the CRA partners with this, of trying to continue to put up signage about eating with food, with drink. I mean, I'm happy to kind of help that, of trying to enforce it, I guess, with owners. I don't know if that's common across everyone listening in today, but, I know, like, they have, wear a mask or no entry. Like, if it is that prevalent of a problem for guests coming in, and I know they want to argue, it's the same way that people want to argue that I'm not going to wear a mask. Understand it's a state guideline right now, and serve them an appetizer. Like, a lot of restaurants have gotten very creative. They're offering, like, a free appetizer, or they're offering, a half off, or different ways that they have to have at the bar or they're at the table. I get it. Some people just want to come in and have an afternoon drink, but right now in these certain times, like, hopefully they'll put some food down with it as well and understand why that is. So I'm happy to talk more about that, David. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Let me just jump in for a second on this. We're fully aligned on this point. So obviously, at the risk of, the governor said bars, straight bars that don't offer the dining experience are not able to open. So the message from us for a while has been restaurants are open, bars are not, because we want to encourage the food consumption and not just drinking for drinking's sake, just because we think that causes issues from a public health perspective. If there's signage, Scott, that we can work on together that has state kind of support, we're absolutely happy to do it. The way that I try to, whenever I'm asked this question, and I was asked it last week on a separate call, in my mind, if someone goes to a restaurant and wants a hamburger and a beer, they can do that, obviously. And then if they want a second beer with their hamburger, that's fine. They don't need to order another hamburger to have that second beer. So there needs to be some judgment on this, but ultimately we can help get the message out more. But we appreciate the partnership here, because we absolutely don't want people just drinking. It's going to cause issues for all of us.
Sure. You got a question specifically just about a clearly defined guide, what you think on timing. Bill's asking about the structures. and kind of how long you think if we do get some clarity on what they can do versus can't do.
Yeah, and listen, here's where I'd love some feedback, and maybe through Scott on this. So the debate is on one extreme, and we've seen some states do this. They have very prescriptive ventilation guidelines, filtering, et cetera, on HVAC. We've opted not to go in that direction. We could. I just think it's logistically difficult and it's expensive to implement. And the other aspect is what we've tried to do today, which is let's make sure ventilation and air quality is consistent with or better than your indoor dining room. But if I totally take the point on, ambiguity, and if it's not enforced consistently, that's not helpful to anyone. So if there are specifics that you think the state should embrace, send them to Scott. That makes it kind of simple and clear. We're happy to kind of go through that with the health folks and the occupational safety folks, because I just want to make sure that we're not creating something that is impossible to follow, but at the same time, I realize it needs to be very clear.
And Bill, I think it's a great question, and the urgency of where I stand with it. I want to get as much clarity and get this thing figured out. And as I talk to you, I talk to Tyler, I talk to Dan, I talk to a lot of people that have these. And if it's an exhaust fan, is it carving out a little? If there's vent in the structure you already have, is that adequate where it is? All of those things. I think we got to get to the bottom of this. I know. It's life or death of having outdoor dining for another month or so. To make it through, because we all saw let's not sugarcoat it. We all knew how this weekend played out. We had some rollbacks and we had 30, 40 degree weather, and you guys saw the dark glim of what winter looks like, unfortunately for the public, and how we start to help that in any way that we can. So our igloos okay or not, they are not fixed yet. So any outside structure, we are working on updated guidelines to be able to allow them moving forward. So unfortunately, it's a good question. We do not have an answer yet. I'm hoping to get an answer now as we work through today and tomorrow to get some feedback from DPH, and also from our side to find some solutions to make sure this is a viable piece, because I get what you're saying. And I'll go back to another comment someone made earlier. Listen, I can tell you right now from where I sit, I don't hold anything lightly of the amount of investment everyone on this call has had to make to follow these guidelines, from whether it was outdoor dining back in May and the investment you had to make from the investment in Plexi inside for indoor dining, the same way that you've made these investments to close in your structures outside to have options. I don't take that lightly by any stretch of the imagination from where I sit, and I'll continue to push. And I get it. That's why, the state grants to the federal dollars, you guys need help to make it through. Let's not sugarcoat the fact that we know that over 600 restaurants, food establishments in our state have already closed permanently or do not have a date for reopening. And those numbers are increasing by the day as I talk to more and more of you, unfortunately. So I know David hears that from me every single day. And, I could beat a dead horse on this specific issue, but I'm hoping we can find a solution that will work for everybody and continue to keep customers safe and staff safe, because I know you all feel the same way, but also being able to have that as an extra option. There's a fourth. Go ahead, David.
I'd say, again, I can't stress this point enough, right? Our goal, we're fully aligned here. We want to keep restaurants open. The issue is, right, and everything that we're doing, it's not because we want to be difficult. That's not the case at all. If we don't get the virus under control, the risk of a shutdown, very similar to what we saw in March or April, is real, in my opinion. So we need the more enforcement, not letting the de facto bars, the tweet you referenced before, like all of that is really critical, so we can avoid a much worse calamity in terms of shutting down the economy. So that's why we're spending time on things like igloos and air circulation igloos. We want to do everything we can to try to stem the spread of the virus. But October has been a very bad month, candidly.
And then Carmela, you asked a question about phase 2 to phase 3. Every Thursday, so on Thursday is where they update the data. So that map that I showed early on, if I can, my screen's still sharing, so I'll go back. This map on the bottom right here, every Thursday they update it. And then the mayors and first selectmen. So unfortunately, if you're in a 14-day and you roll back, like you have to wait 14 days, but it only comes out, it only gets updated every Thursday based on $100,000 number of population for positive cases. And that's obviously, as you can see, that was the updated map as of last Thursday. and it's been growing, which is concerning. As David said, the numbers aren't looking great to be announced today, and how that's going to play out. So you're guaranteed to be in it for 14 days in phase 2. And then, but understand at the end of 14 days, your mayor and first selectman, even if let's say you're in the red and then 2 weeks later you come back in the orange, he can roll you, he can put you back out to phase 3. So, you know, and Bill, I couldn't agree more. I think that David understands that point, as well as the governor, about restaurants are not the cause. We continue to see him quoted that way. We appreciate those comments, and we're going to continue to push that. Restaurants are not the cause. We can't have the fear of people thinking that they have any stretch of imagination that they are. I know I've gotten a lot of media questions trying to say October 8th, you know, because we went from 50 to 75%. It's ridiculous. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. I praise you guys very much so for that, and we'll continue to push that as we try to make it through this winter together. So you are guaranteed to be in phase 2 if you roll back. If your mayor first selectman decides to roll back to stay in phase 3. So as an example, Norwalk decided to stay in phase 3 the first go round. 7 days later, they stayed in the red, and Norwalk now has gone back to phase 2. So they can every 7 days go backwards, but you can't go forward until the 14-day window. Am I right with that, David?
That's right.
Okay. So listen, I know it's 11:06. I know there's a million other questions people want to get to. I obviously will quickly put down that last slide of just my email and others on my staff. If you need to get a hold of anybody, please don't hesitate to reach out. And then I will go back to obviously the beginning of this and go back to the election. It is an important time right now. Know who's in your race, know who's in your district, you know, because I promise you I'll be calling you and talking through major issues that we'll be, you know, trying to talk about a business recovery with these legislators in the state of Connecticut. So our election matters. Don't come complaining to me if you didn't vote in your state election. You know, when you say, I don't understand, like, why is so-and-so like making that bill and it's ridiculous, it's going to kill my industry. Then I turn around and go, well, did you vote for him? Well, yeah, I and then I'm like, what? So like, understand that these local races matter. What Nicole and myself deal with every day and trying to be a business friendly state. It's not as much the presidential election. These local races will matter. When you see predictive scheduling bills and you see minimum wage increases, you see, you know, tip credit fights, those are the real state fights that I deal with every day. And we're going to be dealing with coming out of this. And I want to have pro-business friendly legislators that are trying to help you guys. So, you know, please get out to the polls if you haven't voted already, you know, and support the people that you know that are going to have your best interest at heart. Make our job a little bit easier at the Capitol when we have those conversations. And yes, so I could go through other questions, but listen, again, David, thank you so much for your time, for hopping on this with everybody. You know, so I think we can answer some more questions offline, but we obviously want to keep everybody's time understanding here today. So listen, first and foremost, from the association side, thank you guys for continuing to use us as a resource. Continue to email your questions, text or call. We'll be in touch with coming out of the election with updates of what that means for our state. And then we'll also, like I said before, we'll have an 80/20 webinar next week with Ryan to make sure everyone is in compliance of following those new rules. You know, get out and vote. And I wish you guys all the best the next couple of days. I'm praying that this weather continues to get warmer. Let's hope that we have the warmest November in history in any way that we can. And David, I don't know if you have any other comments.
No, listen, I'll just end where I started. Really appreciate the partnership with you guys, and through, you know, working together, we will get through this as best we can. So we'll keep up the dialogue, and thank you all for having me here.
No, thanks again, David. Thank you, everybody, and have a great Monday. And we'll talk to everybody soon.